this week's episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum, and oh look, Barbie's back. The Good Dram Show is recommended by Greg's Whiskey Guide .com, and there you go, mate, giving you a shout out. And why am I mentioning Greg's Whiskey Guide? Well, I think it was last year he published his list of the top 10, top 20, I think it was, video bloggers or whiskey video bloggers, and yours truly made the list, which is nice. Thank you for that. Always nice to get mentions and a bit of praise. So yeah, there you go. There's a shout out, and check his blog out, which is pretty interesting. Anyway, to today's episode of the show, we're looking at some Claxton's bottlings that were released tail end of last year, and bizarrely enough, while we're talking about Greg's Whiskey Guide, Greg indeed posted a blog post about some of these whiskies earlier on this week, and I swear to you, I hadn't intended. It was purely and utterly coincidental. I certainly didn't see his post and thought, oh yeah, I'll do the episode of the show on Claxton's. And in actual fact, I sat down last week after last week's episode of the show and thought, let's plan the next few episodes of the show out. And yes, I do know what I'm going to be doing for the 300th episode of the show, and I can tell you it's going to be interesting. Epic, no less, as they all are. Anyway, I believe the samples Greg was writing about were part of a tweet tasting in December, which I wasn't part of, but then I'm not a member of the cool gang. Not that that seems to bother me, it has to be said, but anyway, that's by the by. So yeah, I have a soft spot, I suppose, for Claxton's. I love the bottlings, or some of them I should say. I love the bottle shape, the difference, and the fact that they, you know, asked for my advice early on when they were first starting up, which was always rather nice and rather flattering, it has to be said. Whether of course my advice was what they wanted to hear or not, I honestly don't know. But you know, so as is the one, you know, I always look forward to their releases, and of course, you know, give them feedback, and you know, don't always agree with some of the stuff they've released, but you know, by and large, I mean, pretty much like any independent bottler. At the end of the day, they'll bottle some stuff that I think is really, really good, and some stuff that I'm not quite so keen on for one reason or another. But anyway, I mean, pretty much I would say that the quality of the casks that they're getting their hands on are pretty damn good, it has to be said. So I think you could certainly sort of buy a Claxton's bottling without too much fear of the quality of the juice that's inside it. But anyway, so there you go. That's a bit of a sales pitch for Claxton's. Not that they really need it. They certainly seem to be doing okay at the moment, taking on staff, expanding, all that kind of stuff. So which is really, really good to know. So anyway, enough of that. I think let's just take a look at today's lineup then. Right, okay, so the first bottling we'll be looking at is a 10-year-old Benrinnes. This is a cherry finished, sort of ex-bourbon and cherry finished. Don't know whether Claxton's actually did the finishing or whether they purchased the cask as it was. The cask number is 1858 303 886, distilled in April of 2008 and bottled sometime in 2018 at 51.7%. Second bottling we'll be looking at is a 19-year-old Teaninich. It's quite interesting. Don't often see a lot of that about these days, to be honest with you. This is from a bourbon hogshead, 1849 307 946. Nice to see they use concise numbers for their numbering system. This was distilled in July of 1999 and bottled in 2018. So 19 years old and bottled at 53%. Third bottling we'll be looking at is, jumping up a bit in the age statement, is a 22-year-old Springbank. Again, a bourbon hoggy. This is number 185054. Distilled in June of 1996, bottled in 2018 at 55%. So it could be interesting, and it wasn't cheap, shall we say. It's all Springbank, ever cheap. Okay, so then we're going to move on to grain. This is a 32-year-old Dumbarton. Again, a bourbon barrel, 1852 73497. Distilled in August of 1986, bottled in 2018 at 57.1%. So could be interesting. And then we're going to do a Bruichladdich. Yes, look at the colour of that. I don't think you need me to tell you that that is a sherry puncheon. That's very heavily coloured. So this is a 16-year-old Bruichladdich, cask number 1853651, distilled in August of 2002, bottled in 2018, and bottled at 61.2%. So my God, that was a tight old cask, that's all I can say. And the final bottling we'll be looking at is this one. This is a 10-year-old Ledaig from a refill bourbon hoggy, 1851 7075 being the cask number, and it was distilled in February 2008, bottled in 2018 at 54.3%. So nothing like ending with a little bit of peat, and let's hope it's not peat and cardboard. So anyway, that's today's lineup. Let's make a start with the Benrinnes. Right, okay, so let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Well, the sherry is pretty subtle in actual fact. It's really nicely balanced. It's got some obvious sherry dried fruits, touch of sultana, raisin, but the American oak kind of comes through quite nicely, as does the barley. It's quite robust, but it certainly has a bit of elegance to it. Yeah, this is kind of how I like my sherry, just very subtly done. There's a little bit of fleshy apricot fruit kind of coming through now. Yeah, and the barley is nice and noticeable. It's fresh, and it's just like I said. I think it's all really nicely balanced. So, see what the palate's like. Quite chewy, quite malty, a little bit more sherry on the palate. It's certainly got more of that sort of dried fig, raisin, sultana, a bit of prune as well, a little bit of lightly coffee tannin. Not getting quite so much of the barley and the American oak on the palate, but it's got a nice sweetness to it, a nice little bit of kind of sweet treacly kind of note on the finish. And again, I think sort of, you know, pretty well balanced. I'd have liked to have seen a little less of the sherry character on the palate for my own personal gratification, I suppose. But I don't think you can argue with the quality of that one. So nice one to start with. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Teaninich. Let's see what those gives us on this then, shall we? Now that's more my cup of tea, or more my whiskey I should say. Quite citric, fresh, lime, kiwi, apricot. It's got that nice kind of green fruit kind of character, although there is a touch of caster sugar, so it's not too citric, it's not too austere. A little bit of peach, kiwi, quite subtle on the oak. There's a little bit of butter just sat in the background, but it's really fresh, really really vibrant, and it certainly doesn't seem 19, it has to be said. Although there is a little bit of sort of mature fruit just right at the edge. If you kind of sniff fairly hard, you do start to pick up a little bit of that maturity. But yeah, that's absolutely spot on. That's a lovely nose. Let's see what the palates give us. That's got a lovely progression. It kind of starts off with straw-like barley, a reasonable amount of oak, but not too much oak. So sort of vanilla, a little bit of toffee, and then in comes that citrus, the minerality, the sort of like the lime, lemon, barley, apricot, and then it starts to move more towards a sort of like a nice fleshy fruit finish. All the while that kind of fresh citric notes kind of linger really nicely. Quite mouth-watering on the finish in actual fact, and it's one of those sort of whiskies that I bang on and on about. It has a lovely progression. It kind of, like I say, it kind of starts off more with the oak, and then in comes the sort of citrus, the minerality, and finishes on the sort of like the combination of fruit and citric notes, and it's just absolutely lovely. Little bit of maturity. The maturity is more kind of up front with that sort of straw-like barley kind of character, and because it's got quite a citric finish, it feels younger on the finish, if you see what I mean. Yeah, that's good. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Springbank. It's nice to see relatively mature Springbank in American oak. Let's see what the nose gives us. Oh, that's a nice nose. Quite fishy, apricotty, dusty, violety, touch of malt, hints of oxidised to almost kind of cognac-esque kind of notes. Poised, elegant, lovely depth, lovely kind of fishiness. I mean, it really is quite a fishy Springbank, it has to be said. Pleasantly coastal. I mean, that's just such a unique nose, it has to be said. I mean, absolutely fantastic. Really, very good. Yeah, I like this. Let's see what the palate's like. Wow, that's a fishy, malty, violety finish. Kicks off with some lovely kind of mature, again almost cognac-esque kind of apple, barley, fish oils, quite dusty and violety. There's a little bit of peat running through it as well. It's got a lovely salty vibrancy, it has to be said. That is absolutely sublime. I love that. I think that is brilliant. It's just kind of classic old American oak aged Springbank, and with all that wonderful sort of fishy, salty, slightly coastal, oxidised fruit. Oh, it's just, I mean, damn, that was expensive, it has to be said, but oh, that was worth it. Okay, so let's move on to the Dumbarton. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? It's got a lovely silky sweetness to it. Quite fruity in relative terms for a grain. You know, that sort of slightly sort of raisinated dried fruit, maybe more sort of sultanery kind of dried fruits. Quite a lot of coconut. The oak comes in fairly quickly. but it's not too oaky. The sort of the crisp graininess kind of balances it up quite pleasantly. Touch of marzipan. Yeah, I mean that's a pleasant grain whiskey. I mean, you know, it's not the most complex of grain whiskies, and I guess for a Dumbarton I'd probably expect a little bit more weight and a little bit more oiliness, but it you know, it certainly delivers what it says. You know, it is kind of classically grainy. You know, let's see what the palate's like. Quite grippy, quite tannic, but again lots of coconut, a bit of marzipan. The grain is kind of there. It's a little bit sort of I wouldn't say quite hidden beneath the oak. I mean, it's certainly got, you know, some of that sort of dried grainy kind of fruit. There's a touch of almost kind of chocolatey spice kind of coming through on the finish. It's, like I said, it's certainly grippy. It's certainly got some tannin. And, you know, I mean, it's a nice whiskey. It's pleasant. Like I said, from a Dumbarton, I kind of would have thought and expected a little bit more weight, a little bit more oiliness. It does, or should we say, in Dumbartons I've tasted it in the past, it does seem to be a more weighty kind of grain spirit. This doesn't quite have the weight that I would have expected, but still it's a pleasant grain whiskey. You know, can't argue with that. Right, on to the Sherry Monster then. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. Yeah, it's a Sherry Monster. So it's lots of raisinated fruit, it's lots of slightly marmalade-y fruit, there's a touch of salt. I mean, it's got a nice fresh edge, I'll give it that. There's a sort of slight savouriness, but this is all about the sherry punching at the end of the day, and there is something that kind of, yeah, it does leave me a little cold, it has to be said. And I have read reviews, and I think Greg rated this quite highly, but to me it's just a bit too much sherry. I mean, yes, there's a coastal edge to it, but I'm not getting hyacinth, honeysuckle, etc, etc. I'm not getting any kind of real classic Bruichladdich character, and it's all, to me, a little bit one-dimensional, and this is often the case with sherry casks. Yeah, a touch of sort of marmalade-y notes kind of coming through, soy sauce maybe, but again, like I said, I mean, it's just all sherry. Let's see what the palate's like. Very sherried. It's not that kind of herbal, gritty, oloroso-y kind of sherry. It's more a sort of softer, treacly, slightly almost but not quite PXy. It's moving in that kind of direction. You're getting sort of a touch of walnut, plenty of treacle, a little bit of tar, sort of juicy raisinated fruits, a little bit of salt. It's got quite a shortish finish, which is probably more down to the alcohol. I'm going to put a little drop of water with it because I did try and save just a smidge. See whether that makes a great deal of difference. It's sort of lessened the sherry impact on the nose to a certain extent, giving it a more kind of refill sherry kind of character. It's a little bit more apricot, it's a little bit more distillery character. Maybe it's because I'm kind of searching for it, I suppose, I don't know. Touch of smoke, maybe, yeah. It's certainly a lot lighter, and I think I personally prefer the nose with a little drop of water. Let's see what the palate's like now. Still pretty sherried, a little bit more nuttier now, it has to be said. No real distillery character. It's still very much all about the sherry, and I mean, the quality's good. Can't argue with the quality. I mean, it's certainly not a bad cask, and if you like sort of like heavily sherried malts, you're going to love it. If you're more like me, then lukewarm about it, shall we say? But anyway. Next, please. And finally, let's move on to the Ledaig. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Quite meaty. There is a little faintiness to it, but it's kind of all wrapped up in that sort of meaty character. So it's not too sort of, OTT. It's pretty clean by Ledaig standards. There's some earthy peat, there's a little bit of medicinal peat, quite malty, nice density to it, some oak as well. You know what, I like that. I mean, and it just seems to me that the more I seem to be tasting younger Ledaig, I'm wholly convinced that the distillery has definitely tweaked its cut points, because it's not as kind of dirty and cardboardy as it used to be. I mean, it would be interesting to sort of retaste the distillery bottling. Well, I can't remember whether the distillery releases a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, but this, I mean, this is how I think Ledaig should be. You know, slightly meaty, savoury, nice amount of peat, not too much peat, but none of that cardboardy, rough kind of character, and yeah, not chasing too much peat, if you see what I mean. And yeah, there's even a sort of a slight sort of barley sweetness to it. So I think, yeah, this is a pretty good cask actually. Let's see what the palate's like. Briny, waxy, quite salty, not hugely peated. There's a nice kind of smokiness, there's a bit of earthy peat, there's a little bit of medicinal peat. It's all quite nicely balanced, and certainly again, no cardboard, no fust, no must, no dirty old oak. It's really clean, salty, slightly savoury, and I like that sort of slight meatiness to it. I like that kind of Ledaig kind of character, and I've always wanted that kind of whiskey without all the sort of associated dirtiness, shall we say, and grubbiness. And like I said, I mean, this is how Ledaig really should be. Quite complex for its age. It's got a nice kind of progression, a nice kind of citrus note on the finish, a sort of almost kind of tartness, almost kind of mouth-watering. And yeah, I'm really quite impressed with that. I think that's a great cask, and if Ledaig keep going this way, and maybe I'll have to get round to tasting the distillery bottlings of Tobermory and Ledaig again, and just to see where they're at with regards to that. But yeah, good stuff. Right, okay, So let's sum today's episode of the show up. So firstly, I'd just like to say a big thank you for to Claxtons for sending the samples, as they seem to do on a regular basis when they've bottled some new stuff. So it's always nice to have that kind of support, and you know, I'm quite happy to support Claxtons. I you know, when they bottle some really good stuff, you know, why not? And to be honest with you, I think out of this range of 6, you know, I think certainly the quality has been pretty good. Certainly the Benrinnes was okay. I liked the nose. I thought the nose had a really nice balance to it, and if that balance had kind of quite continued onto the palate, I think that would have been a really good malt. As is, it was a little bit too much of the sherry on the palate for my own personal taste, but certainly not taking away anything from the quality of the bottling. Teaninich was definitely my cup of tea. Lovely crispness, freshness, good vibrancy, lovely progression, just everything that I want to see in a malt whisky. The Springbank, again, I thought was absolutely first class, just kind of classic old Springbank. Without any sherry, and it's just always a joy to taste, it has to be said. Not that, you know, I dislike the Springbank sherry, as it has that kind of unique, kind of gritty kind of character, but you know, just seeing it without any sherry, I think is just always really nice. The Dumbarton, again, I don't think I would argue with the quality, probably not quite as complex as I was hoping for something of that kind of age. Obviously grain whiskies are never going to be the most complex of animals on the planet, but you know, that was okay. It certainly wasn't bad. It was just sort of like not quite there. The Bruichladdich, again, I think the same kind of criteria applies. Quality, can't argue with it. Really good cask. Just too much sherry for my liking, you know, no distillery character. It was all about the cask, and yeah, okay, if you like that, then fine. And I can't remember what that would have retailed for, but again, you know, casks of Bruichladdich aren't cheap like casks of Springbank, etc. You know, so you're kind of paying a premium for just tasting sherry. You know, it's like, nah, not getting that one. And the Leche, yeah, really good. Classic, well, not classic Leche, because classic Leche was bloody horrible. Should we say, more modern style Leche, you know, cleaner Leche, more Leche that I would actually want to drink, and I would actually sort of want to put on the shelf and say, look, you know, this is good Leche, you know, believe me. Honestly, I'm a doctor, honest governor. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that was a Leche that I'd quite happily sort of get behind, and I think I might actually have a bottle of it still on the shelf, but anyway. So, like I said, just sort of summing up, you know, a lovely set of releases, something in all of these for every palate, and well, there you go. That's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. You'll join me next week, but until that time, ooh, I seem to be out of whiskey. So, best say good afternoon.